We are in Proverbs chapter 16, beginning in verse 23. And we should finish this chapter. I hope we finish it out today. But it starts off like this. So chapter 16, verse 23, the heart of the wise teaches his mouth and adds learning to his lips. All right, with the wise do not stop learning. The wise are always trying to, the wise will grow wiser by this definition. That they will seek the answer, they will learn, and actually the fool is not going to do this. The fool doesn't want wisdom to begin with, and is the only thing that the fool will do in teaching his mouth is either that of lies or that of foolishness. And in Nehemiah 6 and 8, Nehemiah states that you invent them in your own heart. You have the Sanballat and others who are against Nehemiah and the Jews, that the enemies of Israel, they're not choosing what is wise. They don't want what is good for the Jews. They do not want them to rebuild Jerusalem anyway. No wall, definitely. No temple, definitely. And is trying to end it. And he's creating lies. And it's a matter of intimidation is what he's doing. He's going to send a letter to the king. And Nehemiah just says, you've invented these things. But in Ecclesiastes 10, 11 through 14 is a nice section there concerning a fool and the way a fool talks. And just taking a little snippet out of that, the words of his mouth begin with foolishness, and the end of his talk is raving madness. So the heart of the wise, that's the one that continues to learn. And once again, the wise become wiser still. Now, these two, the next one is together with this one as well. Verse 24 is really a continuation. Pleasant words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul and health to the bones. All right. So pleasant words are like honeycomb. Now one could think just immediately that this is that of good news, and I'm not going to dispute that this could be that of good news. Those are pleasant words, and they are sweetness to the soul. That's not a problem. But Proverbs 15:26 says the words of the pure are pleasant. So it's not just good news that is health to the soul and sweetness to the soul, health to the bones. It's not just good news, but it's the pure words, pure wisdom, things that are pure, are pleasant. That's like honeycomb. And we have other places like Psalm 19, 8 through 10, and also Proverbs 24:13, which we will get there eventually, but it's that of eat honey because it is good. And I don't think that's just Solomon telling his son, and by the way, honey is good if you eat it. I don't think at all that's what he's saying, because I think his son already knows if he likes honey or not. He's probably already tried it. But it would be that of wise, pure conversation. That's what it would be. And Proverbs 24 and verse 7, wisdom is too lofty for a fool. A fool doesn't want to teach his tongue. Fool isn't concerned whether they're producing anything pure or not. Fool is just being a fool. Now we come to verse 25. Verse 25 is connected to verse 22. We have these things that are going back to verse 22. Understanding is a wellspring of life to him who has it, but the correction of fools is folly. We discussed that, but it's the first. Understanding is a wellspring of life. We come down to verse 25. Very familiar verse. It is one of those repeated proverbs from 14:12. There is a way that seems right to a man, but the end thereof is the way of death. And notice that here is the way, this way seems right, but that way is death. It's not taking you where you think it's taking you. Everything about it looks right. Everything about it seems right, but it's not. Years ago, we were actually traveling from West Virginia and just taking the interstate. And we stopped to eat somewhere in Virginia. And I think what happened is there was right there where we stopped an intersection of two interstates. And I got on the wrong one and had no idea. And for an embarrassing amount of time, it was over an hour that we were on that. And all of a sudden I'm seeing signs I know I shouldn't be seeing. There are signs coming up of there's no way we passed that sign. There's no way we went this direction. And then I realized, oh, when I should be heading south, I am heading northeast. All right, this is no good. And everything about it seemed right until I mean, if you had asked me 10 minutes before, you heading home? I would have said, well, yeah. And, well, no, actually, you're not. Unless you are living toward the coast, you really aren't heading home. And so I obviously had to turn around, and it was a long hour getting back to where we actually had lunch. And actually, it's more like an hour and a half. And then get on the right path. Now, everything seemed right about that, but that was, let's just face it, except for wasting 3 hours, I guess, there wasn't anything morally wrong about that. But this concerns things that are morally wrong. That you may think that something is right, but just because you think it's right doesn't mean it's ever right. Just because you are sincere and sincerely going that path doesn't mean that it's right. There's nothing right about it. And of course, we could talk about Uzzah in 1 Samuel with Uzzah and, or rather 2 Samuel, with Uzzah reaching out to stop the Ark of the Covenant from falling off the ox cart. All right, did he have ill intent? No, he wasn't going to harm the Ark of the Covenant. He was going to protect it. All right, and that seems like it's good intent. That seems like there's nothing impure about the desire to do that, but it says his anger was aroused. And Uzzah dies immediately right there because you don't touch the Ark of the Covenant. Even the high priest can't touch the Ark of the Covenant. You don't touch it. Or you will die. And when God says something, He means it. And it doesn't matter if you think something is right, go back to what God said. It doesn't matter if you're doing it out of good intent and every motive is just kind and pure and the best of sort of motives. It doesn't matter. If it's against the will of God, it's against the will of God. The rest does not matter. There is no amount of justification. That there is a way that everybody may think is right. The experts say is right. But you know how many things in my lifetime I have discovered just in my lifetime that was wrong? I mean, just flat out wrong. I was taught it as a kid. I believed it as an adult. And then all of a sudden, I get new information coming down. We have discovered this. So everything that we thought prior to this was wrong. Or didn't you happen to know that that was just lore? Didn't you know that that was just made up by some writer in the 1700s or whenever? Didn't you? Well, no, I didn't. I was taught it as though it were fact. Well, what does that mean? That means the experts, i.e. not me, the experts can be wrong. I can be wrong too, being led by the wrong people. but I can be wrong too. And we can be wrong on the simplest of things and on enormous things. How much more that of moral things? There's a way that seems right. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, 12. Let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. There is that confidence. There's that confidence that happens to be there. Tony.
The next lesson of obedience and disobedience. My son, he was outside playing, and I said, stay off the wood pile. I want you on the wood pile. He got on the wood pile. On the wood pile, the pile fell over, and he got hurt. But he stopped crying. I whipped him.
Okay.
Because, well, he fell off the wood pile. Yes, he
Yeah.
did.
Yep.
If he had listened to me,
Yeah, it wouldn't have happened. Yeah, yeah.
So, God says something. You're right.
Yeah.
That's your primary lesson of obedience.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is. When God has set something, that's it. There doesn't need to be any kind of what ifs about it. What if this? What if that? Well, God said, why are you trying to get around this anyway? Why are you trying to get around it? Just what did God say? Let's go with that and not figure out odd circumstances where it might not apply anymore. Just obey God. But all this comes back around to, but its end is the way of death. Going to 1 Corinthians 10 and 12, let him who thinks he stands, that is having a confidence. A confidence, yes, I am standing in faith. Yes, I am firm. And take heed lest he fall. Well, you can still fall. And maybe your overconfidence is evidence you have fallen already. That may be very good evidence. I told you about a man who came into my office years ago who claimed he never sinned in his life. You appear to be at least 40 years of age, and you're telling me you've never sinned in your life. Okay, let's just put it down as that's impossible. And number two, what you're saying is either you're lying to me and you know you are, or you're about as ignorant as it gets and you don't even know what you're saying. Okay, because it is a man's steps are of the Lord. How then can a man understand his own way? That's Proverbs 20 and 24. And we come back to understand, verse 22, understanding is a wellspring of life to him who has it. All right, that's understanding. That's understanding wisdom. That is the way of God. Understanding the way of God, understanding what is the right path, the path to life, that is that wellspring of life. But there's a way that we can be fooled. And I think this is why this proverb is repeated. Because it needs to be repeated. Because we can become overly confident in something that we just know it's right. Well, why don't you check up on that? Now, it may be, but it might not be. And you might want to check up on it before you take that step. And that would be learning. That would be discretion. That would be prudence. Before you take some crucial step, take care. Now, we come to verse 26. The person who labors for himself, for his hungry mouth drives him on. All right, this is not connected to anything that we have been reading at this moment. But this would go hand in hand with anything concerning the sluggard or the one who the slothful, the one who just will not work. This is in that subject. A person who labors for himself, for his hungry mouth drives him on. All right, this is a proverb that says a lot about humanity. All right? This just described the very impetus, the very motive. It is so basic. This is the simple principle of need, work, and economics. And this is what people must do. All right, let's just take for a moment Cain and Abel. I can tell you right now that there had to have been trade going on, a simple economics, all the way back with Cain and Abel. I can tell you why that would be. Here recently, we were just doing that in the back and talking about Cain and Abel. Cain is a tiller of the ground, which means what? He's a farmer. What is he growing? I don't know, but he's growing vegetables, he's growing wheat, grain, something. I don't know what he's growing, but he's growing vegetables. Abel is a tender of sheep. He's a shepherd. All right? Now, concerning economics, we can think that a shepherd, well, you're living off the sheep. Well, to a degree you would be. Let me explain. You've got wool. You also have milk and cheese and things like that. But prior to the flood, guess what you could not do? You couldn't eat meat. So he could not eat any of the sheep that he had. Sacrificing it, yes, because that was set. God had told them precisely what they needed to do. And we can know that he must have because of the description of his sacrifice. There's a description of it, which means that's too specific. All right, they had to have been given specifics. Now, if Abel is a tender of, or rather a keeper of sheep, if he's a shepherd, well, he's got to get his food somewhere. So he's going to have to make some trades to somebody to get grain, to get vegetables, to get something. Somebody else may need the wool or the milk, and that they give him vegetables. Also, with Cain, Cain is making a sacrifice with what he grew from the ground. Or that was not acceptable to God. So what should he have done? If he doesn't have any sheep, what should he do? And the answer was, steal it? And no, when you need tennis shoes, what do? Do you steal the tennis shoes? No, we buy it. Okay, so you go and you purchase it from your brother. You purchase it from your brother is what you do. And he needs food, whatever it is that you've got. You need a sheep, you need a lamb for the sacrifice. Therefore, you've got an economy. Very, very basic, obviously. The world population would have been small in that time. Okay? There would have been more than 4 people living in that day. All right, there would have been more than 4. And because Cain is, after he kills Abel, he's very much afraid of being found. And it's not that he was so much afraid of his father, but of brothers and nephews and others who may happen across him and want to kill him. Now, I have said that to bring us back to this. A person who labors for himself. All right? In Ecclesiastes 10:15, the labor of fools wearies them. All right? But here we have the absolute motivation. For his hungry mouth drives him on. Here it is. If you take this away of where one cannot grow hungry, you take that away, then really, and everything is absolutely secured. Everything's absolutely secured. Then really there's not going to be a lot going on. There won't be, because if everything is supplied, absolutely there's hardly any effort whatsoever, then there's not going to be a whole lot being done. Not a whole lot. Now, here is a basic fact that is found in cultures. Cultures where they have some kind of hardship during the year, where there's not a lot of food, you've got to put food up, which means you've got to gather it, you've got to grow it, you've got to do something about it. Okay? Cultures like that, they begin to develop. And we find it all over the world. All over the world. But there are places, we would call them more like a tropical paradise, of where everything is available. You can simply take a trail into the forest and pick mangoes, or pick bananas, or pick some kind of fruit. If you want to, you can just get something immediately from the sea. And there isn't much development in those cultures because everything is very easy. They don't have to worry about winter. Therefore, they don't have to worry about how are we going to keep warm. They don't have to do that. They don't have to worry so much about points of the year of where there is nothing there. And so we have places where, they really didn't develop very much. Not very much. And in other places where there was a lot of development because they had to. They had to do it. You had to do these things or you and your family would starve. You had to. But we come to this, for his hungry mouth drives him on. This is so absolutely basic. Absolutely. And while with the poor, we have compassion on the poor. There's no doubt about that. But on the absolute slothful, the absolute lazy of a man who could be doing something, he just isn't doing something. He's not doing anything. We are just, if we are always helping that individual, and I believe in giving somebody the opportunity, but if we're always helping that individual, we're just enabling them. That's what we're doing. And this is also so basic that this just kicks out things like Marxism and communism. This flies out the window. I mean, Marxism flies out the window, and communism flies out the window. That the government is going to take care of you. Well, no, God's going to take care of you. God is the one that you're to have faith in, and that God expects us to work for ourselves and also to help others. That's what He expects. And here is that basic sort of, you can think of it like a cattle prod, of because there is hunger, that means you're going to need to do something that to make somehow so that you can eat. And we can see this in ancient cultures as well, of where, did you know there were potters at Babel? There were. And of course we would know that there were brick makers at Babel because they're making bricks. And there's those making the mortar because they're making mortar. And they've got to be paid for that. They've got to be. There had to be an economy in that. And that's going ancient. Of course, we went further ancient still concerning Cain and Abel. But this has always been going on. This is how it works. And we don't rely on somebody else. And I just came into my mind as just one of those things that kind of irritated me and irritates me today. There was a fellow years ago who needed food. And I was happy to give him food. And he knew He knew where he was coming to get his food. He knew who it was that was giving him his food. And as I am putting food into bags to give to him, he begins to tell me, I don't like organized religion. And I couldn't help but think, you mean like the organized religion that's helping you at this very moment? I mean, you don't like that? Why are you even here? Why don't you go to the ones who you do love and ask them if they'll give you anything, wherever that happens to be? You think they're going to give you much at the bar? No, probably not. Think they're going to give you much at just name it, the library? No, probably not. Anyway, let's go to verse 27. 27 through 30 is dealing with wicked words. And we've already been talking about that of pleasant words. Now we come to verse 27. This is, an ungodly man digs up evil, and it is on his lips like a burning fire. You know, every time I read a proverb like this, the first thing that comes to my mind is the National Enquirer. I can't help it. I don't know if that thing's still around or not. But somebody is making their money off of someone else's dirty laundry of things. Just leave those. It may be true. Just leave them alone. I don't even, I don't know that I particularly like that person, but I will say, just leave them alone. Why are you're making your livelihood by exposing incredibly in their pain? That's not exactly a good human being doing that. Okay, that really is unconscionable, if you ask me. But we come to this: an ungodly man digs up evil. This is this is the work he volunteered for. This is the work that he wants to do, and he pursues it. And when he finds it, he's got to tell it. Proverbs 11:9, the hypocrite with his mouth destroys his neighbor. 17 and verse 4, an evildoer gives heed to false lips. A liar listens eagerly to a spiteful tongue. But here is a man, he's digging up evil, and he's got to tell it. And this goes down to that idea of gossip and gossiping, and that of why tell a lie when the truth is just as good. All right? I could make up something about person A. I can make it up just to make it up. Or I can go dig and find out, is there any dirt here? And well, the dirt's just as good as anything I would have made up. Maybe it's even better. And I can just expose that. I can just do that. Well, that's no good. An ungodly man does this. Ungodly. I said unconscionable. Proverbs is saying ungodly does that. Now verse 28. A perverse man sows strife, and a whisperer separates the best of friends. Here is sowing strife. Proverbs 6:19, one who sows discord among brethren. That's one of those that is an abomination to the Lord. And he who repeats a matter separates friends. Perhaps you have been in situations, perhaps I have, of where there was obviously a very divisive person, a person sowing strife, of where there were long-time friends, 20 years or more, long-time friends, and they're not friends anymore. And I don't know that bridge will ever be rebuilt. And it wasn't because of person A or person B, but because of the divisive person, the divisive man, person C, coming in and busting that whole thing up. Just being divisive. And that's not, a perverse man does that. A perverse man is sowing strife. A whisper separates the best of friends. This goes back to that ungodly man digging things up. Now, verse 29. A violent man entices his neighbor and leads him in a way that is not good. This takes us back to Proverbs 1, beginning in verse 10. Don't let those sinners entice you who are saying, come and let us shed innocent blood. Let's wait for innocent blood. Let's steal from them. We will share all of the loot. We'll share it all. That's what we're going to do. A violent man entices his neighbor. Now, this may not be the sort of thing as described in chapter 1, where that's organized crime, is what that is. A violent man can entice his neighbor in other ways, of where it's just riling up a mob. All right, that's not organized crime. That's organizing chaos, I guess, or that of trying to create chaos, and leads him in a way that is not good. Proverbs 22 and 10, cast out the scoffer and contentions will leave. Yes, strife and reproach will cease. Everybody would have been at peace if it hadn't been for this violent man. Those friends would have continued to have been friends if it had not been for the perverse man who sows strife. Everybody would have gotten along. Everybody was getting along. And here comes somebody to stir the pot, to start making massive waves, and what had been calm and peaceful, and we would just say cool, is now boiling. And it's not good anymore. It's not at peace anymore. Verse 30, he winks, this continues on concerning this violent man. He winks his eye to devise perverse things. He purses his lips and brings about evil. This is what he produces. This is his product. Now, we can go back to Proverbs 2 and verse 12. To deliver you from the way of evil, from the man who speaks perverse things. Yeah, that's who we're discussing again. He winks his eye to devise perverse things. And all of these are going together. That of digging up evil, sowing strife, enticing neighbors, and bring about evil. All these are going together. And this is describing the ungodly, the perverse, the violent. That's who it's describing. Now, verse 31. The silver-haired head is a crown of glory. And look at the next word. If it is found in the way of righteousness. There is that conditional if. Here is this well-matured, developed person, but this is developed in righteousness. What is the saying? There's no fool like an old fool. All right? Now, someone who happens to have silver hair and is a massive fool, well, that's not what this is discussing. If it is found in the way of righteousness. I've told this story before, I'll tell it again, but it concerns that of, specifically Klaus Barbie. Klaus Barbie, who was a Nazi criminal, World War II. At the end of the war, he vanishes, and others vanish too. And it took 40 years, I think, and they eventually found him. And you would think after 40 years after it's all done, you would think 40 years, surely there was some lesson learned. And you would say, I wash my hands of that. I'm through with that. That was the dumbest idea I was ever part of. It's time to start a better life. Well, when they found him, he was still spouting the same stuff as 40 years earlier. It's like, you don't learn. You are a man who just can't learn. No, not can't learn. You're a man that just doesn't learn. You refuse to learn. You've got the same ideology as you always had, and so much for maturing. He was considerably older, much older man than at the end of the war, and eventually, they found him. But here is the silver-haired head is that crown of glory if it's found in the way of righteousness. Now, the opposite would hold true as well, that you would have, the fool would have this crown of folly, not a crown of glory. Now, verse 32, he who sows in anger is better, not sows, I'm back up to this other verse. He who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city. So it is more difficult to rule yourself than it is to take a city. And how many generals, conquerors, kings, etc. have taken cities, and those men were just morally depraved. That they could conquer a city, but they couldn't conquer themselves. They couldn't manage their own weaknesses, and they probably didn't even see them as weaknesses. That they do what they want to do, and without the first thought that what they're doing is proof of extraordinary weakness. The one who's slow to anger, anybody can get angry. Anybody can do that. A 2-year-old can do that. All right, which means anybody can. Anybody can get angry. But someone who can measure that, someone who can keep the lid on and calmly go through. Now, this is slow to anger. That doesn't mean never gets angry, because God gets angry. It's not that someone who never gets angry, because there are certain things that will just naturally get you angry. But being slow is better than the mighty. Being slow to anger is better than the mighty, because that's more difficult, and it requires considerably more discipline. Here is someone who's disciplined. And I know that, like with my parents, when I was a kid, of thinking that they were going to absolutely explode at certain news. But they didn't. Now, they weren't happy about the news, but they didn't explode. They kept calm, and they were measured, and they dealt with the situation, but it wasn't just like a short fuse. It wasn't that at all. And he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city. That is, ruling the spirit takes far more discipline than someone who's taking a city and now rules that city. It takes far more discipline, far more out of the person to do that. Verse 33, the lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. Okay, we've got to put this into proper perspective. All right, in the book of Jonah, Jonah is on the ship. He's asleep. There is a storm, a terrible storm that comes out of nowhere, and the sailors and the captain are trying to figure out what has happened, that somebody greater than us is angry. And they come to a conclusion, it's somebody on this ship. Someone greater than us has brought this storm, and it's someone on this ship. They wake Jonah up, tell him to pray to whatever God you pray to, maybe He can spare us. Maybe that God can spare us. And they want to know some things about Him, but they cast lots to find out, and basically that's rolling dice, that they cast lots to find out who on board this ship is some God angry at. Who is it? And it turns up Jonah. Now, was that just by chance? No, I can tell you it's not. Because it could, if it were just by chance, it could easily have been the captain or some other person who Jehovah's not angry at them because he didn't ask them to go to Nineveh. It wouldn't have been much use to have done that anyway. They're not exactly a prophet of God. But here you do have a prophet of God trying to escape. It's almost like he's thinking, I can run away from God, which is precisely what he told them. He was trying to get away from his duty, get away from God. Okay, so they do cast lots. And in this instance, it does mean God was in that role. Every decision is from the Lord. Every decision is from the Lord. And we need to understand that. Every decision is from the Lord. Now, someone who goes to the casino and is throwing dice and they lose a lot of money today, was it from a decision of the Lord that they lost all that money today? I doubt it. I seriously doubt it. Or if we are playing, you and I are playing Monopoly and we're rolling dice and you win, does that mean that the decision is from the Lord? Well, I doubt that too. I seriously doubt that. But let us not take the providence of God out of the earth. The providence of God is still active, and that's what this means. The providence of God is still here. Never think that God is missing, even from small events. Now, from Monopoly, that's neither here nor there, or we're playing some other game. That's neither here nor there. But things that are significant, and sometimes we may not see the significance at all. But God's providence is there. God's providence is even in small things. And it's never in my life is it something that's just obvious. As in, here is something that occurred, and because that occurred, these other things just came down the line and also occurred. It's not until I'm way down the line that I realize all that happened from this one thing. And this must be the providence of God that has brought it about. It's the providence of God that's brought it about. I didn't know it then, couldn't know it then. But now I can look back and I can see, yeah, that this is what He wanted to happen in bringing it about. Every decision is from the Lord. Proverbs 21:31, the horse is prepared for the day of battle, but deliverance is of the Lord. He's there in the battle. He is there. And with someone like David against Goliath, when Goliath, after David says the battle belongs to Jehovah, he says it, and it's only a few more seconds, and Goliath's on the ground without a head, because David cut it off. And he's holding the head up, and then okay, I suppose the horse is prepared for the day of battle, but deliverance is of the Lord. You have a 9'9" giant prepared for battle, and he's been prepared a lot longer than David has, but the battle still belongs to Jehovah. It still belongs to the Lord. All right, we have run out of time for today. Next week we will begin chapter 17, and I appreciate everybody being with us. Thank you.